Dear students, as part of the paper on research methodology, we will be focusing on report writing in this module. As we undergo research study, starting from identification of the problem, framing our methodology for conducting such study, and completing the whole process in conducting such study, and at the end of the stage, it is very important for us to prepare a report. Very important that a research report is the final culmination of a research process. It is a formal statement of the research process and its results. It is a matter of communication that reporting should be scientific. The report is not to convince the reader, but to convey what was done, why it was done, and what was its outcome. If we complete the whole process in research through various stages, at the end of the stage, we need to present a written statement so that will be a part of documentation for not only for these sponsors, but also for the researchers, policy makers, and various stakeholders who are interested in that particular area of study. In that sense, report writing has a very important component in the research process. There are some issues why research reporting is very important. For instance, issues like what should be communicated in the research process has to come through the preparation of the report. To whom should it be communicated? Through what medium will the communication be more scientific? What effects are needed to be achieved by the communication? What language should be used? Some of these important aspects that we need to address when we are talking about research report writing. Similarly, there are some specific functions that comes out when we highlight a report writing. A report is a means for presenting the problem, recommendations in an organized manner. Similarly, it acts as a reference material for future use. It also enables as a means for judging the quality of the project. It evaluates the researcher's ability and competence. It provides factual base to formulate appropriate policies and strategies. So, such a document is a very important because it serves the purpose of various stakeholders associated in the study of any of your interests. In this, one of the important things which we need to know is interpretation. How to interpret on a more scientific way the various facts and figures that comes out as part of the research process. From the field, when you get the data, when you analyze by using appropriate statistical techniques, the data, once it is analyzed, cannot be just presented in the report. It has to be appropriately and more scientifically interpreted. In that sense, interpretation is concerned with relationships within the collected data, partially overlapping analysis. It also extends beyond the data of the study to include the results of other researchers, theories, and hypotheses. Research report is the final stage of research, and its purpose is to convey the interested persons the whole results of the study in sufficient detail and so arranged to enable each reader to comprehend the data and to determine for himself or herself the validity of the conclusions. In that way, the purpose of research is not well served unless the findings are made known to others. If we mention verbally that we have conducted a study on a very scientific lines, we have carried out with all scientific stages of research, verbal presentation is of no use. because it will serve only at that particular point of time. However, if it is documented and if it is compiled and presented as a report, it can be referred at any point of time and also serves for further usage not only in the field of that particular area but also for policy makers and program managers. Research results must invariably enter the general store of knowledge. It is also part of knowledge generation and to document the efforts in that particular field which has updated ourselves in knowing what has gone into the field and what are the additional information that comes out can be documented in the report. Similarly, writing report requires a set of skills somewhat different from those called for in respect of earlier stages of research. As we have seen, it is a scientific way of presentation of data to the extent it is to be objective, and also the findings have to be systematically presented so that the readers, whoever with whatever backgrounds, can easily understand and also understand the facts and also assimilate so as to see that what type of actions requires and what way they have to be ready for involving themselves in the field. This task of writing report should be accomplished by the researcher with utmost care. He or she may seek the assistance and guidance of experts for this purpose or refer some of the scientific studies or journals or publications in the field so that your report also will be on scientific lines and also can be comparable with the earlier research and the reports on that particular area. There are different steps in writing report. As we have seen, writing a report is to be a systematic way of presentation of the facts which starts from the identification of the problem, going to the field if it is a primary survey, or collecting data which is already existing through secondary sources and presenting them in an orderly manner by appropriate way of analysis and also using appropriate statistical techniques if it is a large scale data. What are the different steps in writing report? Research report is the product of slow but painstaking and accurate inductive work. There are basic steps that are involved. For instance, it should be a logical analysis of the subject matter. The subject matter may be developed both logically and also chronologically. The logical development is made on the basis of mental connections and associations between one thing and another by means of analysis. Logical treatment often consists in developing the material from the simple possible to the most complex analysis. Chronological development is based on a connection or sequence in time or occurrence. The directions for doing or making something usually follow the chronological order. What are the preparations that comes out while finalizing the final outline? An outline of the research report is a framework upon which long written works are to be constructed. They are an aid to the logical organization of the final material and also as a reminder of the points to be stressed in the report. Next step is about preparation of a rough draft. In this step, the researcher writes down what he has done in the context of his research study, like procedures adopted by him or her in collecting the material for his or her study, along with the limitations faced and the technique of analysis adopted, in addition to the broad findings and generalizations and the various suggestions the researcher wants to offer regarding the problem of study. Another aspect which we need to know is about rewriting and polishing of that rough draft. As we seen, that rough draft is a rough one which in the initial stage focuses at instantly of the issues that are interpreted in the first level. As rewriting takes place, it will sharpen our own understanding and also for preparation of the scientific one. In this step, the most difficult part of all formal writing is the polishing and rewriting the report. Usually, this step requires more time than the writing of the rough draft. A careful revision makes a lot of difference between a mediocre and a good piece of scientific writing. One should check the report for weaknesses in logical development or presentation that is possible while rewriting and finalizing the draft. The researchers see whether or not the material as it is presented has unity and consistency. This is another important component to see how consistent in the presentation of the report, how orderly the findings have emerged, so that the reader will not get any confusion in understanding the facts and figures that has come out in the report. He or she should also check the mechanics of writing. For instance, the grammar, spellings and usage, they are all part of the scientific report which have to be adequately taken care of in finalizing and rewriting the report. Another dimension is about the bibliography. As we all know, the bibliography which is generally appended to the research report is a list of books in some way pertinent to the research which has been done. It should contain all those works which the researcher has consulted and also compiled over a period of time. As we all know, research is a process. When the whole process, while undertaking this process, the researcher might have referred so many articles, scientific reports or various publications. So, it is the responsibility of the researcher to see that they are all compiled and presented at the end of the report as a bibliography. Bibliography should be arranged alphabetically and may be divided into different parts. Usually, for instance, the first part may contain names of the books, reports, pamphlets, and the second part may contain names of journals, magazines and newspaper articles. Generally, this pattern is considered convenient and satisfactory from the point of view of reader, though it is not the only way of presenting bibliography. There are different ways of presentation, but normally that categorization with respect to a separate section on books, reports and pamphlets, separate section on journals, magazines and newspaper articles makes a presentation more scientific. Similarly, the research report, when it is prepared, we have to keep in mind who are the audience or who are the readers for whom the report is intended. That is why at the beginning itself we have to be very clear for whom this report is, because it is a report which is meant for the audience who have to verify and refer at different points of time. There are different types of research report, mainly keeping in view of the purpose for which the report is written and the type of audience or readers for whom the report is meant for. If it is a layman and for general public, usually the report is categorized as a popular report. If it is meant for administrators or project sponsors, the report will be for the administrators. And if it is meant for researchers in the same field, then it should be considered as a technical report. So, in this way, the type of presentation is also very important, because the purpose for which and the type of audience for whom it is meant for has to be kept in mind when we complete and prepare the report. There are certain layouts and guidelines for the research report. There are procedures that have to be followed on scientific lines and make it a systematic way of presentation of such report is very important, because the matter which collected and compiled should be logically arranged, and also on a scientific lines it has to be prepared and presented. For instance, when we talk about layout of the research report, there can be a preliminary pages or preliminary section which will throw light on in a summarized way what are the ways that the result report is conveying for the reader. Next it follows by the main text or context in which the report is prepared, and also the end matter or as a reference material it should be at the final stage in the report. When we talk about preliminary pages, the title page for instance should reflect on the, besides title, the period or for the year in which the report has been finalized should be mentioned. There should be a preface which includes acknowledgements, so that the author will be conveying to the reader what is the background of undertaking this study or in the preparation of this research, so that the reader will come to know what are the ways the report is intended and how it is conveying. Similarly, since research is a complete process starting from identification, and also there are a lot of consultations and the technical and non-technical assistance by various stakeholders and also the researchers who are associated, a complete process through which this report has culminated, which should be having a sufficient place for acknowledging the contribution made by all these, because it is a teamwork. And also there are several agencies, individuals, both from the community and from the institutions and the sources through which the data has been collected and compiled. All these individuals, institutions, agencies, organizations and community has to be thoroughly acknowledged in the report. Followed by list of tables. The table contents are important. What are the different tables where the results are appearing and they have been presented should appear. Similarly, there should be list of figures or illustrations, so that will throw light on what are the ways some of the presentations have been made in terms of diagrammatic or graphical presentations. Similarly, the list of abbreviations, because instead of repeating institutions or some of these concepts, it is always safer and also time space will be to present them by using abbreviation. For example, United Nations, if we are using it, instead of United Nations every time, we can put in the beginning and then continuously use UN in the place of United Nations. Similarly, there are several abbreviations which we will be using in the report, and the same thing can appear as a list of abbreviations, so that the reader will come to know when the person is going through the report, so that is easy for understanding, and also it will minimize the space allocated for mentioning that particular individual or agency. All these give an idea to those who read the report, the content of the report and how to locate them easily while reading the report, so that the preliminary page will give you understanding and also prepare a groundwork for knowing how the remaining content of the report will be flown, and also how the reader should understand while going through the main body of the report. Next is the main text. This section provides a complete outline of the research report along with all details. For instance, there should be a chapter on introduction. Introduction will throw light on the background of the study or the rationale for conducting that study, and also the topic in which the research has come, and also the researcher's background or interest, and how the sponsors have approached or the study, how that has culminated in conducting such a large scale study or a micro level study. And in that way, the main background of undertaking that study or the intention for preparing that report will be very, very clear when we are presenting the introduction. And also we have to keep in mind that introduction also can have a reference of the earlier studies. The earlier studies will throw light on, if the reviewer also, the review is undertaken and the earlier studies are quoted, the present study, how it is different and distinct from the earlier studies, and also the space for undertaking the study when we compare to earlier studies will be very, very clear. Are we duplicating with the earlier studies, or is there enough space to be innovative, and also to say that how different and distinct the present report compared to the earlier studies and the earlier reports have to be presented. This all can be part of the introduction. Similarly, in introduction, the researcher should present the different chapters and the chapterization, how scientifically, systematically the various chapters are presented, so that the reader will be taken into consideration how the presentation has been made, so that mentally the reader also will be very clear how he or she should be ready in reading the report and also understanding the facts and figures how they have been presented. Next follows after introduction is the main body of the report. This is the important part because the researcher's contribution will be very well reflected in the main body. For instance, how the methodology, how it has been structured and how the data has emerged, whether it is through main survey or primary survey or it is by taking a secondary sources analysis, all these things will be reflected, and through various tables, graphs and diagrams, the main body of the report will present the facts and figures that comes out, so that it will give the text in which the report is presented. And once the report has various data and its interpretations, and also the type of inferences that can be drawn by the researcher will also be there in the main body. Once it is completed, the final stage is preparing a summary, conclusions and recommendations, so that you continue preparing main report, and at the end we have to summarize, draw conclusions and suggest what are the various recommendations the researcher would like to present, so that it will throw light on how the future researchers can take it, or how policy level implications the report has, and the program managers how best they can take it to the field. All will be reflected in at the end of the report. Now coming back to the introduction, it will state clearly the problem under study, a review of literature, and also to say how significant or justification for undertaking that study. The other important is what are the methodological issues which are adopted and how the chapterization has gone will be presented. And as we have observed, the main body of the report, which is the main heart of the problem of a report, so that the various findings are very well clearly presented in the main body, and how logically they are related and how the type of analysis has been made and supported with various diagrams and graphs will be part of the main body. Further, we have to keep in mind that appropriate tables, appropriate figures or charts and statistics, interpretation of results and statistical techniques all will be part of this main, so that with appropriate headings and subheadings, the tables and figures and charts will be in the main text, so that the reader will say that will be very clear while reading, so that the empirical data will have appropriate objective way of understanding that the study is prepared on scientific lines. And at the end of the report, when we present a summary, it will throw light on very clearly overall what is the type of presentation that has been made and how best those things can be understood. And at the end of the matter, reference materials have to be presented. For instance, the list of references or the bibliography makes all the way scientific, because the study, when it is carried out, should not be seen in isolation. There are several earlier studies might have been carried out which have been documented, and also various reports and records might have been verified, and the main sources from where these references have been made has to be presented by the researcher, so that the readers, whatever their backgrounds, if they are interested to go through the original source, they will have access, they will have understanding of what are the various sources through which this earlier information has been cited, and the researcher's ability in analyzing and presenting more meaningfully and scientifically will be understood by the reader. So all the sources consulted, referred or cited in the text of the report, they have to be given in a systematic manner, and that is the main purpose of the list of presentation of the list of bibliography or the reference listing at the end of the report. Other aspect which we have to keep in mind is keeping appendices. Appendices is very important because it provides additional or supplementary materials that are not given in the main text, but which are very useful still for understanding the report. All analysis of tables and its presentations will not be possible to put it in the main text. So that the researcher has to be very clear what should go in the main text and what can be presented at the end of the report as part of appendices, so that those who are interested to have those details, they can always refer appendices to know in detail further information on the related topics. For instance, it can be appendixes can be to focus on the complex or master tables, those tables which cannot be presented as it is in the main text, because it will dilute the seriousness of the interpretation of the main text. At the same time, if those tables are very complex and they are all at master tables level, the reader, if the person wants to know in detail, always can see and understand and cross refer. In that way, complex or master tables usually presented as part of appendices. Similarly, the various tools adopted and presented, like for instance questionnaires, the schedules or other documents which have been meant for as a checklist or for guidelines while collecting data, they all can appear in appendix, so that the entire way of inquiry through adopting appropriate tools need not be presented in the main text, and they all can come at the end of the report. Similarly, the different types of statistical tests that are used, which are mostly technical in nature, also its explanation can be provided as part of appendices, so that those who are familiar with the statistics and those who are having a technical knowledge in the field can always cross check by referring to the appendix and understanding through that explanatory notes in the way in which the statistical tests are used. Similarly, the type of explanations which are upon the topic and the report, this may also be varying, and they can also be presented as part of the appendix. Similarly, index, in some research reports, index also can be provided, because an alphabetical listing of names, topics and places along with the number of pages in the report on which they are cited or discussed will also add for the easy understanding by the reader, so that the reader will not get confused or the reader will not facing any problem in understanding in the interpretation of the researcher's point of view and how the inferences are done. It will also serve as a guide to reader for the contents of the report, because it will give very important way of understanding. There are certain precautions for writing research report. As a research report is a channel of communicating the research findings to the readers of the report, this task has to be done efficiently and effectively, for which some certain precautions are important in understanding in the prior to the finalization of the report. For instance, what should be the length of the report, how many pages and how much content has to go when we are presenting the report has to be understood prior to making an attempt. Similarly, the report should not be dull, it should sustain readers' interest. Abstract terminology and technical jargon should be avoided to the extent possible. It should contain ready availability of the findings. The layout of the report should be well thought out, and it should be free from grammatical and other errors of language. It should show originality and contribute to a solution to a problem. It has a relevance for policy, so that policy implications when future directions for research have to be given. Bibliography references must be given properly. It should be attractive in appearance, neat and clean. So these are set of guidelines which a reader will also generate interest besides knowledge by reading the report. And these guidelines will also reflect on the writing style of the researcher. It makes the writing visually easy to read. It places information where it will be seen. For instance, writing style of first and last paras, start of the paragraph, these are all to be orderly kept. Keep paragraph simple, short paragraphs, or each paragraph contain one main point, and writing style paragraph wise. It is important way to organize information. It enables people to skim through and quality how find information. There can be visuals or graphics. Also set of guidelines when to use. It clarifies the data, it creates visual interest, and it condenses and simplifies the data. It makes numerical data more meaningful, and the visuals or graphs what to use when tables are to be shown to show exact figures and values. There are different types of graphs and diagrams like bar charts, line charts, pie charts, flow charts, organization of charts, photos, maps, certain illustrations. They all are very important while preparing the report. Thus, in conclusion, we have to keep in mind that we have to be very clear when we are preparing the report for whom this and who are the audience and readers for the report. We should be very clear what should be addressed in the report. We should be very concise. There should be always an executive summary, which is very important prior to the main report. The summary should be reflected. What is the best way to present the information should be kept in mind before attempting, and appropriate proofreading makes a lot of difference, so that the scientific report will be come out as a culmination of the whole process through which the report is presented.